after they flogged Christ, the soldiers plaited a crown of sharp thorns and pushed it down on his head, causing streams of blood to cover his face and neck. Then they put on him a purple robe, and they kneeled before him and mock homage. They put a reed in his right hand. They would take it and strike him again and again and again. There were several times when the mob dealt cruelly with our Saviour. After the night trial of the Sanhedrin, he was sent to the guard room where he was horribly abused. Herod's men tormented and beat him wickedly. Now the soldiers, 500 of them, circle around the creator of the universe, who could have willed their death in a split second, but he didn't even murmur. He didn't even utter a word of impatience. So he's taken back to Pilate, bleeding from head to foot, and Pilate says to the Jews, "Behold the man," not "behold this man," behold the man, a unique person. No one like Jesus ever had been, ever was, ever will be. Shall I crucify your king? We have no king but Caesar. My friends, if you are intelligent, and you must be or you wouldn't be watching this program, you see the world is very sick. Last century, more men were killed than the previous 2,000 years. The world is in a very bad way. Why? This tells you the world has no king but Caesar. If they'd only acknowledge the Prince of Peace, there'd be no wars, there'd be no cruelty, there'd be no lying, there'd be no abusing of women. Wives would not complain about cruel husbands. Politicians would live lives that would lead to respect if we worshipped the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But we were like the Jews, follow Caesar. There's never been a man entirely good except Jesus. Think of the worst deed in the world and I tell you, I am capable of it, given the right circumstances. But lest you misunderstand me, let me add, you are capable of it. You go without sleep for a week, your family will find you very hard to live with. They won't want you at work. Given the right circumstances, any of us is capable of the most wicked act. And so, because the world worships worldlings, like the ruler of North Korea, like the former ruler of Iraq, like the ruler of Libya, and some would say like the ruler of the present United States of America. The Jews said, we only worship Caesar. That's the world's problem. That's why the world is in such a mess. And so they call out to Pilate, crucify him, crucify him. Won't you take Barabbas? No. Now Barabbas was an insurrectionist and guilty of murder. And that guilty man was released as though innocent, and Christ, who was innocent, was treated as though he was guilty. Oh, you say, that's strange. Oh no, my friends, it's happened in millions and millions of cases. It happened to me. If you're a Christian, it's happened to you. This interchange between Pilate and Barabbas represents what Jesus does with every sinful soul who repents and comes to him. They are freed from their bondage to evil. They are forgiven their past. Their infirmities are covered, for the cross of Christ is like the pillar of light over Israel. It shines out, giving blessing all our days. Don't think of justification and forgiveness as only the beginning of the Christian life. It's over the Christian all these days. That won't make us careless about sin. If we understand what we are studying today, we will hate all forms of sin with an intense hatred, because sin crucified he who has loved us infinitely. So Barabbas, the guilty one, goes free as innocent, which happens to every person who becomes a Christian. I want to let him go, said Pilate. If you let him go, you're no friend of Caesar's. Oh, that struck a sore point. The Jews continued, we have a law that says anyone who makes himself the Son of God shall be put to death. Ah, Pilate is stabbed again. Son of God. That fitted the man he saw before him, who could endure all sorts of things without impatience, without murmuring, with an infinite love for the unlovely. Now Pilate is scared. Was he the Son of God? So he goes back to Christ. By the way, remember the Jews stood outside the praetorium. Christ had to come out to see them. And instead of bringing Christ out to confront his accusers, which was the legal Roman way, he left Christ inside. So he'd have to go back and talk to Christ. So he was on the outside, the inside, the outside, the inside, and the outside. 7 of them. Just as the Jews had 7 accusations against Christ. And Pilate 7 times, if you put all the Gospels together, said, I find no fault in him, which fits in with the rest of the Gospels. Judas said, I betrayed innocent blood. Thief on the cross said, he's done nothing amiss. We indeed justly suffer the reward of our deed, but this man's done nothing amiss. Pilate's wife, don't do anything against this just man. The centurion, after the blackness and the earthquake and the heaving of the ground, so the veil of the temple was torn in two from the top to the bottom. No human hand could do that. Centurion said, surely this man was innocent. And the people that stood with the centurion agreed he was indeed innocent. Trace them through, you'll find there are 7 of them. And Pilate knows he's innocent. But he's scared at this possibility of him being the Son of God. So he goes to Jesus, he says, where did you come from? But Christ won't answer him. Christ is silent. Christ had answered him when there was a hope of reaching the conscience of this poor, weak procurator of Palestine. Now he won't answer him. When Pilate said, where did you come from? Christ doesn't answer. And the enraged, petty policeman of the land said, what? You won't answer me? Don't you know I have power to crucify you, or I have power to release you? Then he got an answer he had not expected. You could have no power at all against me. unless it was given thee from above. Therefore, he who delivered me to you, Caiaphas, has the greater sin. And sin is the last word Pilate hears from Jesus. Sin, 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 sin. And the next word he will hear will be from God on the judgment day, when he's sent to the left to everlasting loss. So they place the cross upon Jesus, and he's propelled towards Golgotha, the place where Isaac was offered up, the place of the skull, the formation of the ground, its geological form made it look like a skull, and there may have been skulls there from former victims. Almost all commentaries say that Christ was now so weak and stumbling they had to find someone to carry the cross. None of the Gospels say that. He would have been terribly weak. He'd been up all night. You know what a night's lack of sleep can do to you. He'd been up all night. He'd had 7 trials. He'd been smitten, spat on, muscle used against him, flogged. My friends, I wonder, do we really understand what he'd been through? He was scourged so that our wounds might be healed. He was condemned that we might be counted as righteous. He was given a crown of sharp thorns that we might have a crown of glory. He was mocked and reviled that we might be honoured and blessed. He couldn't save himself so that he could save us. He chose death that we might have everlasting life. I wonder, friend, do you understand it? And do I, who speak to you, do I understand it? He bore in his own body our sins to the tree. He suffered once for all, the just for the unjust. He offered himself for the sins of many. He was accursed for our sake. He was made sin for our sake, that we might become the righteousness of God. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The Lord caused all our iniquity to be laid upon him. Do we understand it? Do we live as though we understand it? Do we give God his place in our lives? Is the time of devotion sacred to you? This book of which we're told we're to live by every word of it, do you take that seriously? No, it doesn't say that Christ was stumbling and therefore they had to find someone, but they suspected that he might break down after all he'd been through. So they chose a passerby who was looking with sympathy upon Christ. They grabbed Simon of Cyrene. He may have been black. Whatever he was the first fruits of a multitude of people from all nations who would take up the cross and gladly follow Jesus, first in their own homes, then in their business, then with their neighbours, then to all the world. That's what it is to be a Christian. So Simon became the first fruits. We even told his sons' names, Alexander and Rufus, who became great Christians. But he was the first fruits of a multitude from all the nations of earth. As the Via Dolorosa is traversed, there's a cluster of women weeping for Jesus. And Jesus stops and he says, "Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the day is coming when I say, blessed is the womb that never bore. Blessed are the breasts that never gave nourishment. And they'll call out to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, on an innocent man, Christ, who would die at 33, You begin to go downhill after 33, but Christ had to be a special offering, perfect in every way, so he has to die at 33. If they do these things in a green tree to someone like Jesus, what will they do in a dry tree? What will they do when all Israel is torn by strife? They rebel against Titus, against Rome, and soon there are so many crosses outside the city of Jerusalem, they can't find wood for more crosses. So when 1,100,000 are killed in the city, many by famine, many by conflict, then they take 100,000 more, make slaves of them for the gladiatorial shows, for the salt mines. So Jesus says, don't weep for me, weep for yourselves. A day is coming when people will long for the mountains to fall on them and the hills to cover them. Ah, my friends, consider what he did for you. Consider what he did for me, and ask him for strength to follow him in all things, always. God bless you.